So in this video, we're going to talk about the principle of design balance. But before I go into that, I want to kind of go back over those principles of design, sometimes called the principles of organization. They are, again, repetition, variety, rhythm, balance, emphasis, economy, and proportion. Okay, so those are the way that we organize, or those are the considerations that we use when we organize the elements of art. And those elements, again, are form, space, line, texture, light, color, and time. So we take those elements, we organize them through these principles, and we come up with our work. And so sometimes I think, well, who cares? I mean, we're going to do this anyway. We kind of do it intuitively. I mean, we do it intuitively. Don't think there are too many people, except there are artists, that like to do these sort of intellectual games, and they like to study perception. Okay, it's more of a scientific thing. But for most of us, we're just putting these things together intuitively. But what I like to do is, for myself, is if I'm having trouble and I think, oh, in one of my pieces, maybe it could be a stronger piece if what? And I'll kind of run through the principles to see if there's anything I say, well, could this be emphasized more? Is my variety strong enough, etc. But then again, we're back to just words. We're back to just terms. And these are terms that most people, when they go to see art, they're not using. But art students use them, art critics, museum directors, art aficionados. They're all aware of these things. So anyway, we are naming them. And the next one we're going to be going through is balance. And so balance in a 3D work, we sort of consider if something, if it weren't balanced, it would fall over, or perhaps it's got a really strong base that's dug into the ground, which isn't the case with this piece right here. This is actually a very balanced piece. But we're not just talking about a physical weight, we're talking about visual balance and visual weight, and all parts of all areas of an art piece have a specific kind of weight. And there are factors that go into this, like value, the lights and the darks, texture areas, form, the size, the color, and they all kind of affect our perception of a visual weight. For example, light colors appear lighter in weight than dark colors. Transparent areas seem to weigh less than opaque areas. Yellow areas seem to expand. Blue areas tend to contract. So it's just sort of a game, this intellectual game, where we are balancing the parts to make it all seem like it is kind of a unified weight about it. So the first thing we're going to talk about are the several kinds of balance that we name. And the first one is symmetrical balance, where one side looks like the other. The weight of one side is exactly the same as the other. Now, we're going to use symmetry, and this piece is actually perfectly symmetrical. For our purposes, and I'll show you pieces at the end of this lecture that are basically symmetrical, and that's how we're going to talk to them. But if you really wanted to emphasize when you're describing a piece that is perfectly symmetrical, go ahead and use that. And it may give your audience, your listeners, a better idea of what you're talking about. But anyway, from the side, you can see this. It gets a little trickier when we go to this side of this piece. Oops, let me see. This is called Cleopatra's Wedge. It's by Beverly Pepper, a British artist. And you get a sense here, this is kind of a very thin wedge shape of this Corten steel, which is a real favorite amongst public sculptors because it ages with this beautiful patina over time. But this is really a big piece up here that if it didn't look like it was visually symmetrical, you would get a real uneasy sense that the whole piece would fall over. And it would, because this weight is probably much bigger than that. We get that sense. Here's another piece. This is Parque Güell by the architect Antoni Gaudí in Barcelona. Symmetrical piece. One side looks like the other. Okay, now we're going to get into some of that weird stuff with, photographs. So this is the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, which was once a Christian fort, and then the Muslims came in and took it over, and it became a mosque. And then during the Crusades, there was some part of the Crusades that took this back over, and it became part of, let's see, I think it's Queen Isabella. This is where Christopher Columbus came to get his orders to go look for the New World. But anyway, we can kind of sense from the photograph that this is going to be a symmetrical piece. And in fact, it is a symmetrical work. But I'm just showing you the photograph is asymmetrical or not symmetrical, but we know intellectually that the piece is symmetrical. It's the same from one side if this is the axis to the other. It's possible this way is even symmetrical. Okay, now we're going to get into, so that was symmetry, right? So sort of like almost mirror image. So now we're going to get into asymmetrical, where the piece itself is not, if you go through the axis here, through this central imaginary line, the visual weight of this side looks similar. It has the same weight, visual weight, as this side does, even though we can see it is not truly symmetrical. So that's what we're talking about in the artist. It's like a tricky dance, right? So where do I have the visual weight of something? So if we can see another one. And this one actually has two axes. Here, this fulcrum, this triangle, and this triangle. Also an asymmetrical piece. Although if you looked at this front part, this starts to become, if you looked on it head on, it would start to look symmetrical. Here again, something that is perfect symmetry here. So works of art have a vertical balance and they also have a horizontal balance. And this has a perfect vertical balance, but there's something else that we know intuitively, and that is if something is really tall, it seems like it could tip over very easily. So something that this artist did was put these little supporting areas, like these little buttresses on the side of this piece. This is John Storrs. It's called Forms in Space. So sometimes just to ease the feeling for our viewers, we might put these little supportive areas on the side so they don't have that sense of unease, although there are artists that actually like to do that. And I'll show you a piece of that in a second. You may hear terms over the years of something called radial balance. And radial balance this is a mandala done by the Tibetan monks. And you can see them there. They underneath here, they started out with a what you would call a cartoon, a drawing, the plan. And so this takes days and days and days. And these guys are sitting there with these tools that feed colored sand, over the top of these areas. So they are just building, they're coloring this thing in with sand. That's what all of this is. So they spend all these days doing this thing, labor intensive, and then going along with some of their beliefs, this one is being swept away. It goes along with their concept of impermanence. I've seen other ones where they've done it outside and they leave it for the rain to make it disappear or the wind to come along and blow it away. But they're pretty wonderful to see. Okay, so let's go over this a little bit. Here is an asymmetrical piece. This is a mammoth hand. I think this is in Rome, from something from one of their statues. Looking at this is also Parque Güell again. This, you can see this is an asymmetrical view, but if you looked at it coming from this way, it would probably look symmetrical, because here we have these columns. You can see a hint of that one there. And these are sort of that rhythmic, balanced columns here, though at an angle. So really depends on your perspective, whether it looks asymmetrical or symmetrical. This is a marble bust of a woman, and we're going to call it symmetrical, although if you'll notice, she's got this slight, just little tilt to her head, which is something I really love about this. She's looking like a very proper lady, but she's got this little sense of attitude that I really like about her. Plus that sweet little smile. Oh, and here we are from the side, which is certainly not symmetrical. There again, depends on your point of view. This piece is symmetrical from the side. From the top, it would look radial. This is a very cool fountain. And let's see, and probably if you guys looked at this long enough, you'd figure it out, but I'll let you know. This is plexiglass, and there's two cylinders of plexiglass, one inside the other one, with just a real little tiny space between them. So the water comes up through the sides here all around. It's sucked up and then goes across the top here and vortexes down, and it's just sort of a continuing cycle. Pretty interesting. All right, so let's look at this. This is an asymmetrical piece, meaning this side is not mirror image of this side, but you get a real sense, and the artist here intuitively, balanced the colors. This piece looks very heavy compared to, say, this piece or even this piece. This one has a little more weight than that one. And so intellectually and intuitively, this artist has arranged these so that they make the viewer feel okay about the balance, that everything seems right. It's kind of a neat piece. So here was that piece I was telling you some artists really play with kind of that dis-ease, that energy of something looking like it could fall over. It's looking like it's in motion. This is called chrome grid. It's some kind of glass or plastic material embedded in this metal mesh. Kind of a pretty piece. And this last one, it's a relief. Probably we could call it a bas relief. I don't exactly know the dimensions of it, but let's say it's under 6 or 7 inches. It looks like a game of some sort, but when we look at it closer, we can see that the angles, the way this was cut, each top plane is a little bit different from the next one. So although it looks like it might be symmetrical, and for all intents and purposes it is, it really isn't. And here again, that whole idea of balance, this is another way that we can give order in chaos with how we use balance.